Hello, and welcome to the very first edition of our new Lammermuir Festival podcast. I'm James Waters.
And I'm Hugh MacDonald. We are the artistic directors of the Lammermuir Festival, and over the next 4 weeks, we'll be bringing you news and views about all things Lammermuir. The festival starts on Thursday, September the 5th, and in the course of 12 days, we'll be presenting no fewer than 38 amazing concerts of beautiful music across the beautiful county of East Lothian here in Scotland.
And in the podcast, we're going to be talking about some of the fantastic musicians we've invited to perform this year. This is our 15th festival, and that feels like a bit of a landmark. Back in 2010, we started with only 10 concerts, but the whole thing seems to have grown like Topsy. This year, we've got a truly international lineup. It's invidious to pick a few out, but I'm going to. We have a recital by the extraordinary French mezzo Véronique Gens. We have performances of Joby Talbot's Path of Miracles in the Concord Hangar. The visionary American pianist Jeremy Denk is returning to us once again. And we probably have the world's greatest viol consort fretwork. So as you can hear, there's considerable variety.
Well, later we'll be talking to Daisy Evans, who's directing Scottish Opera's production of Benjamin Britten's Albert Herring. But before that, well, we have a rather sensational ensemble in residence this year. Concerto Copenhagen is one of the best Baroque orchestras in the world, and we're incredibly excited that they'll be giving 4 concerts in the festival. Earlier, James and I spoke to their director, Lars Ulrik Mortensen, about Concerto Copenhagen and the extraordinary range of music they're going to bring to the festival.
Und wer da lebet und gläubet an mich. Und wer da lebet und gläubet an mich. Der wird nimmermehr sterben. Der wird nimmermehr sterben. Der wird nimmermehr sterben. Und gläubet an mich. Er wird nimmermehr sterben, er wird nimmermehr sterben, er wird nimmermehr sterben. Und wer da liebet und gläubet an mich, er wird nimmermehr sterben, er wird nimmermehr sterben. Halleluja, Halleluja.
That was Buxtehude's cantata Ich bin die Auferstehung und das Leben. I am the resurrection and the life, performed by Concerto Copenhagen.
So Lars, tell us about Concerto Copenhagen.
Well, Concerto Copenhagen was founded in 1991 and started out to be, I guess the first real sort of, at least trying to be professional, Scandinavian early music ensemble. A trend and a development in worldwide performance practice use which had not really caught on in Scandinavia until that time. And it was a long and slow and sometimes quite complicated build-up process. But over the years, I guess our status has improved. Hopefully our quality has also improved. And now we do see ourselves as quite, as you said in the beginning, an ensemble which has which deals with a wide variety of styles. Of course, we are firmly seated in the 17th and 18th century, but the excursions into the 19th century with composers like Garde, Grieg, Schumann, Beethoven has been ongoing for the last 10-15 years. And we've also ventured into contemporary music. We took the quite unexpected step, I suppose, of appointing one of the most well-known Danish contemporary composers, Carl Aage Rasmussen, as our house composer 7-8 years ago, which resulted in a number of works dedicated to us. So Coco, I guess, is less about a stylistic unity, but rather generally based on an approach to music making in general, which hopefully makes sense to a lot of people.
I mean, for us, it's the first time that we've had an ensemble in residence. It's the first time we've brought someone internationally. You're taking us on a seriously interesting musical journey. There's a lot of repertoire that very few people will know, but it would be really interesting to take us through how the programs came together. Obviously, the first one is built around Buxtehude, but you know, the other thing about these programs is they all have great titles. So can you take us on a journey through the programs?
Well, finding a great title for a program is the first and most important step to sell it, sadly. But anyway, we do tend to base our general programming around not necessarily a title, but a concept, which is both entertaining and enlightening, and hopefully often exploring, well, less familiar roads. And three of our four programs are relatively firmly based in the 17th century. The first one, of course, has Buxtehude as a chief composer name, but the repertoire it explores is, in more general terms, the amazingly fertile environment for church music, which happened from the middle of the 17th century and onwards. So Buxtehude is the chief composer, but it features many of his less well-known, but even so talented colleagues like Weckmann, like Meder, and it explores the range of cantatas for a smallish instrumental ensemble, mainly strings and dulcian, combining that with the bass voice. And this style of music, to me, is still some of the 17th century, which to me appears the most contemporary, the most immediate also for an audience of today. The language does not stay strange and unfamiliar for much longer than 5 minutes. And after that, there is a range of colors and a range of expression, a depth of expression in this music, which to me to this day still remains one of the most fascinating aspects of early music that I know.
Lars, I remember once going to Lübeck, where Buxtehude was the organist for many, many years in the St. Mary's Church, the Marienkirche, and being absolutely astonished by the building, which is absolutely huge, made of brick. And you stand at the front looking up, and it's so high that front the facade. And Buxtehude's music has this kind of really radical kind of edge to it, and I just wonder if somehow that even that building kind of created the atmosphere in which you create this amazing music.
I am sure it did for Buxtehude and for the listeners to listen to this music for the first time from 60 something onwards, during the long period of Buxtehude's stay in Lübeck. And there is a universal meaning to me. It is music on a grand scale, and music can be on a grand scale even if the format apparently is more intimate. And I really think that the depth of that music has a lot to do with the environment. Having said that, of course, today when we perform the music, we somehow also, in any case, need to adapt to the format of the actual performance. And there is no doubt that for Buxtehude, this was basically chamber music. Maybe on a grand sound scale or sound stage, but the immediacy and the directness of the expression is definitely still springs from chamber music.
You were talking about chamber music, and the second concert, Stilus Fantasticus, is built around instrumental virtuosity. Where does that program come from?
From a deep and everlasting love of 17th century music. That period to me has always been even so, if not more fascinating than the experiences that one might gain by adapting the sound world and the performance practice conventions of more familiar Baroque music. There's still a lot of discoveries to make here, and the Stilus Fantasticus was a term which was basically used about any music composed not composed in a pre-described form. The form of the music, the language of the music emerges from the meaning of the music. So we have a lamento, we have a piece of Trauermusik, of mourning music written for a dead emperor, which in a style which can mostly be described as a kind of quiet instrumental meditation. We have pure music theater. We have the Polish bagpipes, incidentally by the same composer, Johann Heinrich Schmelzer, who was Kapellmeister in Vienna. We have a spectacular and completely crazy piece of music based on an ostinato bass, the Chacona by Bertali. And this program is basically meant to delight, to surprise, possibly occasionally to shock, but basically present a vast canvas of the inexhaustible variety with which the composers went about composing music, again here especially during the second half of the 17th century, where forms had not been established. 50 years later, everybody knew how a sonata went, how a concerto went, how a suite went. But a lot of those conventions had not yet been established here. And it's the search and the exploration of conventions that the composers undertook that for me still results in an enormously fascinating musical sound world.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of fantasy is just so fascinating. And we're delighted also that you're bringing a Scottish composer to the festival, because Georg Muffat, who is the subject of the third concert, had Scottish ancestry.
They said, which he spelled, whom he spelled a little differently, I think. Moffat.
Well, he did, but I did a little research into his
okay.
name, and in fact, in the 17th century, that name in Scotland was spelt the same way very often, sometimes with an O, sometimes with a U. But Muffat, he thought of himself as German, of course, didn't he?
Yeah. And that program is the general trend, again in the second half of the 17th century, was that any composer who wanted employment, who wanted work, who wanted business success, needed to identify himself with a national style, a national way of, a national musical language, if you will. And there were two possible points of orientation. One was Italy, and the other one was France. And it was very clear that the divide between those two, the conventions within each style, were pretty well defined at this point. But in the 1680s, and we should not forget here, of course, that Europe a few decades before had seen the end of the most devastating war that mankind had ever experienced, namely the 30 Years' War. And Muffat was one of the composers, another one was François Couperin in France, who deliberately set up to conceive a musical style which was non-exclusive, but which incorporated elements from both those seemingly uncombinable musical language. And that was a political and even more movingly for me, a kind of philosophical statement. Muffat says himself in his preface that I am not a man of war. My means are not arms. My arms are sounds and a music which are combined not to divide, but to fuse, to combine different nationalities, different language, to provide a common base for, well, basically musical existence, which is equally important and equally relevant to everyone. One can analyze the music, but that message to me today does not seem one bit less relevant than it was in 1682 when the music was composed.
And then we have the Swedish Handel, which is quite a big claim, but Roman had serious links to London and indeed directly to Handel himself in terms of context.
Yeah, the Swedes traditionally call him something like the father of Swedish music, and there is no question that both his quality but also his range of musical styles contributed to an identity in Swedish music that they hadn't seen before. But indeed, Roman was influenced not only by Handel and traveled several times to London. He also went to Italy and generally again was a sort of collector of influences which helped to build up an understanding and a level of music making in Sweden which it hadn't seen previously. We also combined him. He was probably even more closely connected with another Italian compatriot, namely Francesco Geminiani, with whom he studied. He copied his works and imported them to Sweden. And Geminiani was another very important violinistic influence on Roman. And it has been fun to combine those three different musical languages. Roman himself was a kind of musical chameleon. He can express himself in a very conservative language, as we hear, for instance, in his party music for a festival for the a celebration for the Russian ambassador in Stockholm. But he can also write concertos which basically sound like music composed 40 years later. An incredible adaptability and an incredible range. And again, seen from the Coco angle, there would be no point in playing any of this if we weren't convinced about the quality and the staying power. It's not exotism for exotism's sake. But funnily enough, we just played that program yesterday in a concert here in a Danish festival. And again, it was amazing to experience how immediately that music works on a modern audience who very, at least yesterday, and we hope, of course, that will be the case in Lammermuir as well, react to this unfamiliar music with basically unbridled enthusiasm.
I mean, it seems, I mean, we're obviously very grateful to you for coming up with 4 wonderfully differentiated programs. It feels to us like a pure festival project, taking people on a journey the whole way through.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have to say that we really, really can't wait to welcome you in about 10 days' time. And thank you very much for doing it. Looking forward to it very much.
We are looking very, very much forward to. Thank you very much.
We were talking there to Lars Ulrik Mortensen about Concerto Copenhagen's Lammermuir Festival residency. The first of their 4 concerts is on Monday, the 9th of September in St. Mary's Parish Church in Haddington, when they'll be celebrating the extraordinary genius of Dietrich Buxtehude and some of his lesser-known contemporaries. For more details of that and their other concerts, take a look at our website at lammermuirfestival.co.uk.
Now, we're delighted that Scottish Opera is going to be with us again this year. For the past several years, they've given us some wonderful operatic experiences, sometimes featuring some of the lesser-known gems of the opera repertoire. This year, they returned to Benjamin Britten with one of his best-loved operas that they haven't done for a very long time, not since, I think, 1971. It's his comedy Albert Herring, and Scottish Opera will be giving 2 performances in Haddington's Corn Exchange. The production is going to be directed by Daisy Evans, and James and I had a very interesting chat with her about it. Daisy, tell us a little bit about Albert Herring and how you came to be involved in this production, and how much do you love the opera?
Wow, how do I quantify how much I love the opera? Yeah, I mean, I actually really do love the opera. I knew it really well before I was asked by Scottish Opera to stage it. It's one of those pieces that I've actually directed in small chunks. I've kind of done scenes here and scenes there when I've been doing scenes at various academies or places like that. So it was always something that I've always had a vision for. I'd love to do it all together rather than bleeding chunks. So I was very excited when this opportunity came up. It's a very unique proposal, this one, I suppose, because we're doing it's almost site specific, I would say. So we wanted to envisage it in the Corn Exchange and try and use the space of the Corn Exchange as part of the design, because it's a lovely place to be, and it would be a shame to kind of ignore it and create something completely different on stage. So we present to you the Loxford Village Hall, where all the action takes place, and it's just about joy of community, really. And I think Albert Herring is the perfect piece to show that.
Let's just think about the story itself. Could you just briefly summarize the scenario and what happens?
Yeah, so it's a village, and the community vibe in the village is very, very strong. And every year on the 1st of May, there's a festival, and part of the festival is there is a Queen of the May, and the Queen of the May is crowned, and they are given various accolades, prizes, and then this year, Lady Billows draws together a committee of people to choose the Queen of the May, but they can't find anyone amongst the young women who are suitable. They've all got low morals, and they've done various things throughout the year that's, made them unsuitable for such a pure and chaste role. So they decide that actually this year it should be Albert, who is a young son of the grocers, and he is crowned King of the May. And he doesn't really want to be King of the May, but he's a rather unassuming. This is what part of his charm and his innocence, and why everybody wants him to be King of the May, is precisely the reason that he doesn't want to be King of the May. And his friend Sid shares that opinion, and he thinks that Albert is too under the thumb of his mother, and he's too innocent. He's too green. So what he and his girlfriend decide to do at the May celebration is to spike Albert's drink and kind of loosen him up a bit. And so that's what happens. And Albert goes out for the evening and nobody knows where he's gone. And I think we never know what happens. And that's kind of the rest of the opera.
You you mentioned doing it at various bits at academies, etc. Funnily enough, in my dim and distant past, I learnt Mr. Gedge for something at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland in the first ever year of the opera course back sometime in the late 14th century. Actually, one of the things is the cast. I mean, obviously there's a bit of Rolls-Royce casting with Susan Bullock as Lady Billows. I mean, how do you, but it's an enormous ensemble cast. I mean, how do you go about rehearsing it with, you know, a cast of 13, 14?
Well, I don't know. That's the question, really. I think you just have to create a really strong sense of ensemble, and I think that's precisely what makes Albert Herring so strong. Is that yes, it's a big cast, but everybody plays a kind of equal role, and it's part of the concept of the opera itself that it is a community. So I think just getting everybody on board and getting everyone infused with the idea, and I think what part of Britten's mastery is that he's such a brilliant dramatist and he draws characters very brilliantly. So I think even though there's a lot of different people on stage, they all have a very specific and very clean cut role to play. So everybody's kind of equal in that respect. Nobody shares any character traits. You know, there's something for everybody to bring to the table, and I think that's part of its charm.
And it dates from 1947, isn't it? Just after the war, and it was first performed at Glyndebourne. So and it's very much a small scale chamber opera, isn't it, with a very small orchestra. Which in many ways is ideal for the Corn Exchange in Haddington. It's a charming comedy, but it has pathos in it too, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really, I think there's something to be learned through Albert Herring. I think a lot of the messages that are in it are incredibly valid today as well. You know, it's about not judging a book by its cover. It's about giving everybody their time to shine, and some people take longer to grow into the human that they will be. It's also about not pressuring people to be who you want. I think that's really what we have is the overarching message here, is that everybody's pushing Albert to be something, and they all have an idea of what he should be and what purpose he serves, whereas actually he doesn't want any of those things, and he's very clear about that right from the very beginning. You know, I think often when people think about Albert Herring, they think that he's this shy, retiring character, but he really isn't. You know, he's very clear that he's just happy kind of doing his own thing, and that's why I think a lot of people want to answer the question of what is it that he gets up to overnight. And a lot of people ask me that, you know, what is it that he does? And I think it's important that we don't know. Actually, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. You know, he goes off and he does what he wants to do, whatever that may be. You know, it's not about him coming of age. It's just about accepting that he's his own person and that he's going to get on with his life. And I think that's kind of, I think a lot of what Lady Billows says is actually strangely very relevant. You know, she talks about how we should not regard gender, how we should be accepting, and that we should all play our part in society. And I think it's another sort of a misunderstanding of the role. I think she's often seen as a kind of stuck up, snooty, highly moneyed individual, whereas, you know, she's just a pillar of the community that's doing everything she can to uphold morals. And yeah, and
I mean,
think
one of the
that's
reasons
what's going to come across in my show.
one of the reasons that we've gone to the Corn Exchange for the first time, because the other operas we've done with Scottish Opera, which goes back 4 or 5 years now, is for clarity. I mean, it's a very text-based opera, isn't it? It's not beautiful tunes with one word per 5 minutes. But I mean, is that a key to how you make the whole thing work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a drama. It's almost a play. It's a play with music. There's very little in terms of, even with other Britten operas, there's not loads of arias. There's some really outstanding ensemble in Albert Herring, I would say. Some sort of, but I think they're all almost tongue in cheek, kind of a lot of choral moments, but I think he's using that to kind of paint the picture of this like very opinionated town council. But yeah, no, it's definitely much more of a play with music. So it's very recitative based. It's very quick. The humor, I mean, a lot of the humor lies in the caricatures and, you know, what people say as an offhand. And it's going to be about character painting, and that's a real virtue of being in a space like the Corn Exchange, is that the audience is going to be nice and close. So not only are they going to hear everything really clearly, they're also going to see those little bits of characterization. They're going to see facial expressions. They're going to see throwaway comments, throwaway actions, and it's going to be a really exciting thing.
And does the fact that it's a small orchestra, it's very much a chamber ensemble, does that, you know, do the individual instruments mirror the characters to a certain extent with that degree of clarity and precision?
Yeah, for sure. And Britain does do a lot of kind of leitmotifing and a certain amount of what we would now call Mickey Mousing. I don't know if he knew he was doing that, but there's a lot of comedy in the orchestra. There's a lot of characterization that comes through the percussion, for example. The percussion plays a really big part. The piano plays a really big part in terms of being kind of, what would you say? How would you say this? It plays a character, and that's used at times to kind of show us what mood the characters are in. And there's a lot of quoting. He quotes a lot of other operas. Whether people will pick up on that or not, I don't know, but I think Britain thought it was quite funny. And it's all adds to the kind of mastery of the humor. The humor works on so many levels, and it, like all good opera, it's not just in what the characters are saying or the situation. It goes right through into the orchestration, which is very exciting.
And I think I'm right in saying that it's the first time the Scottish Opera has done a production of it since 1971, which is a long time ago. So we're looking forward very much to seeing it, Daisy, and to see how you've conceived it and put it together. It's very exciting.
Great.
Thank you very much for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
That was Daisy Evans talking about Scottish Opera's new production of Albert Herring. They'll be giving 2 performances at the Corn Exchange in Haddington. The first is on our opening night on Thursday, the 5th of September, and there's a second performance the following evening, Friday the 6th. There are still some tickets available, but don't delay. Check out our website for online booking and, of course, details of everything else that's going on at the festival. That's at lammermuirfestival.co.uk.
Now, we'll be back with more guest artists and festival news a week from now. Until then, enjoy a snippet of Scottish Opera's orchestra conducted by Stuart Stratford. Goodbye.